Hello, class. I developed this domestic media assignment when I first started teaching this course a couple years ago. I've taught many law courses over the decades and ethics too in the last dozen years or so at Northeastern. I'm keeping these older articles because they're less immediately contentious and less motion-laden content and analyzed by myself and successive groups of students so we can get a deeper understanding without being caught up in what is the very latest and one thing conflict with another and so forth. And same with the international assignment, the Ukraine war, self-defense, the special military operation. So I try to present this, like the other assignments, neutrally to watch my semantics because my role is less about caring what you think than how you think. So focus on analyzing the logic, the pros and cons, evidence-based decisions, etc. Understanding both sides of an issue deeply will increase your chance of winning an argument, and as well as the reduce real divisions to get to the core of what the differences are, so you can focus on them, and with good faith can lead to mutual understandings. A little bit reminiscent of that video on arguments we watched earlier in the semester. Some of these issues are universal or facially neutral, of equal applicability. For example, in the media assignments. For crimes, for instance, there's prosecutorial discretion. The county or state or federal prosecutors have the right to decide who they're going to prosecute, and it's been long-term law that you can't successfully defend based on, you prosecuted me, but you didn't prosecute this person. That's the nature of prosecutorial discretion. They get to choose. And they're either elected or appointed, so ultimately part of the political process should keep them in line, keep them fair and even-headed. These latest two issues, Hunter Biden laptop versus the false election fraud allegations, they might not be the best two issues to compare, especially over time, as the Biden example, I think, turns out to be weaker and the Trump example is stronger. That wasn't my aim, but trying to select the best two to compare, as you try to do too, I think is sometimes hard. With the Hunter Biden thing, the Republicans' hearings on the, not the laptop and the gun crime. I mean, if he's convicted, right? So if he did the crime, he's got to face the consequences. But the attempts to connect Joe Biden to alleged crimes seemed spurious and ultimately did lead back to Russian disinformation more recently. And Republicans cited the need to investigate. But that was more like getting pulled over by cops for an investigation of possible crimes for no reason other than one's political bumper sticker. And not that it doesn't happen the other way around with Democrats and other interests the same way. As far as newsworthiness of the crime, Hunter Biden, not a politician, a private citizen versus, crimes President Trump, ex-President Trump, has been accused of enormous consequence comparatively. So, and even defensively, politicians will act in their own interest as well. So, like, take, for example, allegations of President Biden's incapacity. They're often thrown, or just like the Biden laptop thing, often thrown off as dismissed as, not true, hyperbole, just meant for political points. But there's sometimes things to that. And I think, as some of you pointed out in discussions, to dismiss them is really a disservice by these media companies and ourselves as well, collectively. So Trump's own capacity has been questioned as well, but I mean, he does have questionable comments and his behaviors and so forth. Is he really stable genius as he's claimed, or a master manipulator? Stable often, but I wouldn't trust him to do the right thing unless he was paid for it somehow. His transactional self-interest, I think, is clear. Whether or not you agree with it is a political matter, but and as far as genius, I mean, I remember when I was a Northeastern student undergrad, last century. I read his book, The Art of the Deal, and it was very interesting and entertaining. It turns out there was a ghostwriter. It turned out ultimately they inherited almost $500 million, and that was what made him rich, and despite that led to bankruptcies. Whatever. He's also had a great deal of success in different ways. And that isn't really the issue. When you look at capacity, though, his genius is narrower in the communications and the effectiveness of it. But ultimately, when you look at the two of them, in the debate, Trump just seems so much more sharp than Biden, because Trump can be sharp that way, and he didn't unduly misbehave like in other types of debates. But and also Biden just did so poorly, which just kind of underscores that, like, well, again, we're the Democrats, trying to skirt the issue, not address it, claim it doesn't exist. Well, it seems that way now. We'll see where it goes from here. Ultimately, all this is polarizing, and these polarizations meant to place narratives and put their own narratives in. So one side wants to own the libs, the other one wants to criticize the basket of deplorables in these culture wars, which are basically concentric circles of mistrust and manipulation. It kind of starts with the lobbying money, enormous amount of lobbying money that influences politics. So you have the gun lobby, you have civil rights versus police interest, you have social welfare versus corporate welfare. More lately in the news is, it's been effective for a long time, around for a long time, APAC, American Israeli, not political action committee, it's policy analysis, something like that. Anyways, that has garnered a huge amount of support for Israel, the state of Israel, over the years, and for both Democrats and Republicans, and even more recently, despite the indefensible carnage against innocent civilians in Gaza, men, women, boys and girls alike. And if there's any doubt, just to cut to the chase, if there's any doubt about that, I'm not talking about the larger question of the right to exist, self-defense, all that stuff. Just the narrow issue of the human rights and the gross violation of that question. Would the state of Israel use the same military techniques if they had to go after Hamas in their own Israeli towns and cities? And clearly they would not. So that collateral damage is treated differently in Gaza than it would be if it was in a place where Israeli citizens prevailed. And the attempts to obfuscate that limited point and limit discussion to October 2023, not the decades before, are telling. So anyways, point being that lobbying has a huge influence. We have a right to lobby. It's freedom of speech and so forth. But the influence is sometimes doing a disservice. Ultimately, it comes down to human nature. We're all fallible. And I'll make that point in relation to, even broadly, politics and politicians and even the judiciary in some cases. So when we have this polarized, confusing world, manipulating perceptions of reality makes it more difficult to have a sense of cohesion and stability and peace. We'll naturally default to our comfort programs, our favorite Fox, or our famous favorite MSN, or other programs. You might watch The Office for comfort. That's for humor and relaxation versus trying to get your point of view reinforced and feel comfortable that way. So ultimately, sources matter, approaches matter, logic matters, and evidence matters. In the latter area, the judiciary in particular, that analysis can hold the day, where hype and hyperbole and alternative facts can be tested. They can be adequately tested and screened out as either illogical or against the weight of the evidence. Sometimes even the judiciary can be suspect, since it's made of human individuals with their own life experience, which includes their own biases, conscious or not. And that whole area is called legal realism. That basically that, it's nice in theory, but in the real world, it's made of people, and people are fallible. Does it, cure everything? No, but it is a good form, and it does help. It's sometimes questionable in result because of, again, back to the lobbying and the politics, the disinformation and so forth. People competing for interest versus virtue and so forth, not talking about virtue singular, but just basically, you know, a faithful analysis of what the reality is, and versus, you know, self-interest. So you look at, like, Trump recently claimed that 82% of the country believed that the election was rigged. So, you know, despite the 60 lawsuits that the Republicans and Trump lost trying to fight the election, lawsuits across the country that were had judges that were Republicans or appointed by Trump even, he lost all of them. States certified the results, Congress accepted the results. Ultimately, even a group of conservatives, including former federal judges, examined every fraud and miscount claim by Trump and concluded that they failed to present evidence of fraud or inaccurate results significant enough to invalidate the results. So, unless Trump was incorrect, he was either lying or exaggerating. Available data show that maybe 20% of respondents believe Biden's win was illegitimate, which still, given all that I just said, about the proof that there was no fraud of any significant nature, it's still concerning. 30% of the people just refuse to believe that. So for him to say that, you know, well, even Republican members of Congress who were involved in government, had the access to the most detailed information about the election, more than 80% of them said Biden's victory was legitimate. So to have 30% of the general population still not believing it is concerning. And ultimately, it would be a gross exaggeration to say Trump did not lie about this. It's just the way it is. So without getting caught up on the politics of it all, I'm just trying to get you to focus on the analysis, and any fair argument, go for it, whether it's counter to me, as you might perceive my beliefs to be, or counter to your fellow student opinions. You know, if you can make concessions to the other side, that will lend support to your credence. You know, lend credence to your you know, believability, credibility, and save your strongest arguments for the most contentious. Good luck on all that. Look forward to reading your assignments in the media, domestic and international. Thank you. Talk to you later.